The Galactic Confederation had a problem. Not the usual kind of problem involving territorial disputes or philosophical debates about the nature of consciousness. No, this was much worse. Their most advanced dimensional propulsion system, the crown jewel of 3,000 years of collaborative engineering, had stopped working, and nobody knew why. Somewhere in a basement office on the 73rd sub-level of the Confederation's Central Technical Institute, a translator algorithm made a mistake. A tiny, insignificant mistake. The kind of mistake that happens when you're converting a request for quantum mechanics specialists with unconventional problem-solving approaches from Valorian script into Earth's linguistic database. What should have gone to MIT, Caltech, or CERN went to a county fairground in rural Alabama. The message arrived during the annual Innovation and Grilling Expo, which was exactly what it sounds like. Half engineering showcase, half barbecue competition. The recipients thought it was spam, then they thought it was a joke. Then a government helicopter landed in the parking lot and things got real interesting, real fast. Dalton Krieger wasn't what you'd call a traditional engineer. He'd never graduated from any university, mostly because he'd been too busy building things that universities said couldn't be built. His specialty? Making broken things work with whatever he had lying around. He'd once fixed a combine harvester using parts from a dishwasher and a lawnmower. The farmer said it worked better than before. Dalton said that was because university engineers overthought everything. Standing next to him was Roxanne "Rox" Tillerman, who could weld anything to anything and frequently did. She'd learned her trade in her grandfather's shop, fixing oil rigs and tractors. She had opinions about alien technology before she'd even seen alien technology. Those opinions mostly involved the phrase over-engineered garbage. The third member of this unlikely trio was Percy Kimball, a man who'd spent 30 years maintaining industrial machinery in factories that probably violated several safety codes. Percy's philosophy was simple. If it makes a weird noise, hit it with something heavy. If it still makes a weird noise, hit it with something heavier. This approach had a 93% success rate, which was higher than most diagnostic computers. They were loaded onto a transport that they assumed was military. The interior looked like someone had tried to design a spaceship after reading about spaceships but never actually seeing one, which, coincidentally, was exactly what had happened. The Confederation's human contact team had based their design on Earth science fiction movies. This would become hilarious later. The journey took 6 hours, though they had no idea they'd left Earth's atmosphere until Percy noticed the window showed stars that weren't moving right. "Hey, Dalton, either I'm having a stroke or we're in space." Dalton pressed his face against the window. "Well, damn." Rox didn't even look up from the magazine she'd brought. "Y'all are just now figuring this out? Window's been showing nothing but black for 2 hours." The transport docked with something enormous. When the doors opened, they found themselves facing 3 aliens who looked like they'd been designed by a committee that couldn't agree on anything. The first one, who introduced himself as Thexila of the Valorian Science Collective, resembled a blue giraffe that had been compressed vertically. The second, Chris from the Methodical Concordance, looked like someone had given a filing cabinet sentience and too many limbs. The third one, Yabrin, appeared to be made entirely of crystalline structures that refracted light in nauseating ways. "Greetings, Earthling technical specialists," Thexila said through a translator that made him sound like a GPS with delusions of grandeur. "We are honored to have representatives of your planet's finest scientific institutions." Dalton scratched his head. "I think there's been a mix-up. I fixed tractors." "Excellent. Agricultural machinery adaptation requires tremendous quantum-level understanding of mechanical interface dynamics." "No, I mean I literally just fix tractors. When they break, I make 'em work again." Thexila's eye stalks quivered with what might have been excitement. "Applied practical mechanics. Wonderful! Your reputation precedes you." Percy leaned toward Rox. They think we're smart. They're about to be real disappointed, she whispered back. The aliens led them through corridors that seemed designed to make walking as complicated as possible. Every 50 feet, there was some kind of checkpoint requiring biometric scans, temporal displacement verification, and what appeared to be a quiz about philosophical consistency. Dalton just walked around most of them. They weren't locked, they were just there. The aliens seemed horrified by this breach of protocol, but couldn't actually explain why the checkpoints mattered. They arrived at a chamber containing what could only be described as a mechanical nightmare. Tubes connected to spheres, connected to cubes, connected to shapes that hurt to look at. The whole thing glowed with an angry purple light and made a sound like 1,000 dentist drills having an argument. This, Chris announced with the reverence of someone presenting a religious artifact, is the dimensional compression drive. It allows faster-than-light travel by folding space-time through 17 adjacent dimensional membranes simultaneously. Dalton stared at it. What does it do, though? I just explained what it does. No, you explained what it says it does. What does it actually do? Thexela's eye stalks deflated slightly. It propels the ship, faster than light. So it's an engine. Well, yes, technically, but that's an absurdly reductive. Is it working? No, that's why you're here. We've had our best minds analyzing this for 17 cycles. The quantum flux regulators are within acceptable parameters. The dimensional membrane integrity is at 99.7%. The temporal displacement buffers are... Dalton walked up to the machine and kicked it. Hard. Something inside went clunk. The angry purple light flickered. You got a manual for this thing? Yabrin produced what appeared to be a floating holographic book, roughly the size of a refrigerator. The complete technical documentation spans 14,000 pages across 732 chapters, with supplementary theoretical frameworks requiring an additional... Does it have pictures? The crystalline alien made a sound like ice cracking. Pictures? This is advanced scientific documentation. We don't need childish... If it don't have pictures, I ain't reading it. Dalton turned back to the machine. Rox, what do you think? She'd already climbed halfway into the machinery, which caused all three aliens to make sounds of extreme distress. Stop! You can't just climb into the dimensional compression drive. There are protocols, safety procedures. You need at least 6 weeks of training before... Found your problem, Rox's voice echoed from inside the mechanical guts. You got a blockage in this tube thing here. That's impossible, Chris consulted a floating screen. The plasma conduit flow sensors show optimal passage rates. Yeah, well, your sensors are wrong. There's something stuck in here. There was a sound of metal scraping metal, then a thunk, and something small and metallic bounced across the floor. Thexela picked it up with a manipulator arm. That's a fastening bolt. How did a fastening bolt get into the plasma conduit? Someone probably dropped it during maintenance and forgot about it, Percy said, examining the machinery with the critical eye of someone who'd seen this exact problem 1,000 times in 1,000 different contexts. But the safety checklists, the quality assurance protocols, the 17-stage verification process. Let me guess, Dalton said. Y'all got so many safety checks that nobody actually checks anything anymore. They just assume someone else already checked it. The silence from the three aliens was deafening. Rox climbed back out, her coveralls covered in some kind of luminescent oil. Try starting it now. Chris manipulated the controls with trembling appendages. The machine hummed. The angry purple light turned a pleasant blue. The sound changed from tortured dental equipment to something almost melodic. Somewhere, an alarm that had been blaring for 17 cycles finally went silent. By the 7 spheres of methodical concordance. Chris actually stumbled backward. It's working! The efficiency ratings are... They're better than original specifications. How is that possible? You had back pressure in the system, Rox explained, wiping her hands on a rag. That bolt was causing turbulence, making everything work harder than it needed to. Once you clear the blockage, whole system runs smoother. Thexila's eye stalks were doing complicated geometric patterns that probably meant something profound in Valorian culture. But we had teams analyze this. Computational models, simulations, years of theoretical analysis. Yeah, but did any of y'all actually look inside? Percy asked. Look inside, with eyes? That's primitive, but it works. Yabrin's crystalline structure was refracting light in patterns that suggested deep philosophical confusion. This challenges everything we understand about proper diagnostic procedures. News of the repair spread through the Confederation station faster than their precious dimensional drives could manage. Within hours, Dalton, Rox, and Percy found themselves in a conference room facing what appeared to be the Galactic Confederation's equivalent of a technical review board. 14 different species, each more elaborate than the last, sat in judgment. The head of the board, an entity that looked like an orchid had achieved sentience and poor fashion sense, spoke through a translator that added unnecessary echo to every word. We have convened this assembly to understand the methodology employed by the Earth specialists in resolving the dimensional compression drive malfunction. We took the bolt out, Dalton said. Yes, but what theoretical framework guided your analysis? We looked at it. You looked at it? Well, yeah. Rox climbed in there and looked around until she found what was wrong. The orchid being's petals quivered. But the proper procedure requires comprehensive sensor analysis, computational modeling, theoretical projection of potential failure cascades. Or, Rox interrupted, you could just look at the damn thing. An alien that resembled a geometric proof given physical form raised what might have been a hand. But how do you determine which components to examine without predictive algorithmic guidance? Experience, Percy said. You see enough broken things, you start recognizing patterns. Patterns? This from a creature that was basically a floating brain in a jar. You're describing intuitive reasoning. That's not science. Call it whatever you want, Dalton said. It works. But it's not reproducible, it's not documentable. It violates the fundamental principles of the scientific method. Rox leaned back in her chair. Y'all are really worked up about us fixing your engine. The next problem came 3 days later. The station's water recycling system had failed, not completely, but enough that the Confederation's environmental engineers were in a state of what could only be described as elegant panic. They'd evacuated 2 entire sections and were running complex models to determine the optimal course of action. Dalton found them in a control room, staring at screens full of data that scrolled past too fast for human eyes to follow. What's going on? The lead engineer, a slug-like being named Morphix, gestured at the screens with several tentacles at once. Catastrophic failure in the aquatic reclamation network. The biofilter matrices have experienced a cascade degradation event. We're losing 0.03% of our water capacity every hour. So your water filter's broken? It's not a filter, it's a complex biological and mechanical symbiotic system that... Morphix stopped. Yes, essentially. The water filter is broken. Can I see it? Absolutely not. The environment inside the reclamation chamber is delicately balanced. Introducing foreign contaminants could collapse the entire ecological matrix. Percy was already pulling on a hazmat suit he'd found in the corner. This one? What? No, you can't just... There are protocols. You need 6 weeks of... But Percy was already through the airlock. The reclamation chamber turned out to be a large room filled with tanks, tubes, and what appeared to be carefully cultivated algae beds. It smelled like a pond, a slightly sick pond. Percy walked around for 5 minutes, then came back out. Your algae's dying because it ain't getting enough light. One of them light panels is out. He pointed at the ceiling where, sure enough, a panel was dark. Also, you got a filter screen that needs cleaning. When's the last time you changed it? Morphix consulted a datapad. The photonic emitters are scheduled for replacement in 6 months, according to the maintenance protocol timeline, and the filtration membrane was theoretically calculated to last another 17 cycles. When's the last time someone looked at it? We have sensors, and I'm telling you, your sensors are wrong. That light's been out for weeks based on how dead that algae is, and that filter's clogged solid. An hour later, after Percy had replaced the light panel and Rox had cleaned the filter screen using nothing more complicated than a hose and elbow grease, the water system was running at 107% efficiency. The extra 7% came from removing buildup that had been accumulating for years, but was still within acceptable parameters, according to the sensors. Morphix stared at the readings like they'd personally betrayed him. This is impossible. Our predictive maintenance protocols are designed by the finest computational minds in the concordance. Yeah, but computers can't smell when something's wrong, Percy said. That pond smelled sick. Took me about 30 seconds to know something was off. The incidents kept coming. A navigation system that wasn't working because someone had enabled a safety feature that prevented it from working. Life support that was using 10 times more power than necessary because it was running a bunch of redundant backups that were backing up the backups that were backing up the original. A door that wouldn't close because the sensor thought it was already closed, even though it obviously wasn't. Every time, the humans fixed it in minutes. Every time, the aliens insisted it should have taken weeks. Every time, the solution involved looking at the actual problem instead of the data about the problem. This did not sit well with everyone. Commander Vrelick of the Systematic Approach Enforcement Division was a being who took protocol seriously. She looked like someone had given a filing system sentience and military authority. Every part of her exoskeleton was labeled, categorized, and filed in triplicate. She did not appreciate the humans making her department look bad. She found Dalton in what had become the humans' unofficial workshop, a storage room they'd commandeered and filled with parts cannibalized from other broken equipment. This cannot continue. Dalton looked up from the power coupling he was modifying. What can't? This flagrant disregard for proper procedure, this dangerous reliance on primitive intuition instead of proven scientific methodology. You're creating a culture of shortcuts and violations. We're fixing things. You're fixing things wrong. But they work better than before. Vrelick's exoskeleton plates clattered in agitation. That's not the point. The point is maintaining standards. What happens when you leave? Who will fix things then? Your methods are not teachable. They're not documentable. They rely on this experience and intuition nonsense. Rox looked up from the circuit board she was soldering. Have you tried teaching people to look at things? Look at things. We have advanced sensors. We have predictive algorithms. We have 17,000 years of accumulated scientific knowledge. We don't need to look at things. And yet, Percy pointed out, everything's broken. That hit harder than he probably intended. Vrelick's plates stopped clattering. That's not... We have some functional challenges, but, lady, in the 3 weeks we've been here, we've fixed 47 critical systems, Dalton said. And from what I can tell, y'all got about 400 more things that are broken, but you've just worked around them for so long, you don't even notice anymore. That's a gross exaggeration. The bathroom on level 7 that only flushes if you hit it at a specific angle. The door on the main hangar that won't open unless you cycle it 3 times. The food dispenser that gives you yesterday's menu unless you enter tomorrow's date. Should I keep going? Vrelick left without another word, but she came back 6 hours later with a list. A long list. These are all the systems currently operating in what we classify as acceptable degradation status. Dalton took the datapad. It was 63 pages long. You want us to fix all of these? I want you to show me how you fix them, step by step, so we can understand the methodology. All right. First step is to go look at the actual... Besides looking at it, What analytical framework guides your observational priorities? Rock sighed. Okay, here's the thing. You're trying to make this more complicated than it is. When something's broken, you figure out what it's supposed to do, look at what it's actually doing, and fix the difference. But how do you determine the difference without comprehensive diagnostic analysis? You use your eyes. What followed was perhaps the strangest educational seminar in Galactic Confederation history. Dalton, Rox, and Percy took Vrelick and a team of increasingly confused engineers through their process, which turned out to be less of a process and more of a philosophy. Look at the thing, think about the thing, try the obvious solution first. If that doesn't work, try the stupid solution. If that doesn't work, take it apart until you find the broken bit, fix the broken bit, put it back together. The aliens took notes. Extensive notes. They tried to create flow charts. They attempted to develop algorithms. They wanted to reduce everything to a reproducible procedure. It was driving them insane. You keep saying, look at it, Chris said, manipulator arms gesturing frantically, but you never specify what to look for. Whatever looks wrong, Percy said. But what constitutes wrong in this context? You'll know it when you see it. That's not an answer. Sure it is. Look, see that panel over there? The one with the indicator lights? Percy pointed. Yes? What do you notice about it? The lights are illuminated in a standard operational pattern consistent with... One of them's flickering. Chris looked closer. So it is. But it's still within acceptable parameters according to... It's flickering. That means something's wrong. Maybe it's loose, maybe the bulb's dying, maybe there's a short. But something ain't right. But the sensors say... Forget what the sensors say. What do your eyes say? This was apparently a revolutionary concept. The idea that you could trust direct observation over sensor data was causing what could only be described as an epistemological crisis among the engineering staff. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later, during an incident that everyone would later agree should have been much worse. The station's main reactor started showing fluctuations. Not dangerous fluctuations, according to the sensors, but fluctuations nonetheless. The safety protocols called for a complete shutdown, which would have left the station on backup power for 6 weeks while they figured out what was wrong. Dalton asked if he could look at it first. The reactor chief, an elderly being named Gorthax, who'd been running reactors for 3 centuries, was desperate enough to agree. Gorthax had that look that every experienced engineer gets eventually. The look that says they've seen too many safety briefings and not enough actual problems. The core temperature is fluctuating by 0.003 degrees every 17 minutes, Gorthax explained. It's within safety margins, but it shouldn't be happening at all. Dalton studied the reactor core through the shielded window. What changed recently? Nothing. We haven't performed any maintenance in 3 cycles. The protocols don't call for maintenance until... What about automatic stuff? Anything that adjusts itself? Well, the cooling flow regulators automatically compensate for efficiency drift, but those are completely independent systems that... They ain't independent if they're both connected to the same reactor. Show me the cooling system. The cooling regulators turned out to be in a completely different section of the station. They were, predictably, covered in screens showing data about flow rates and temperatures and 17 other measurements that were all within acceptable parameters. Dalton ignored all of them and went straight to the physical equipment. When's the last time someone calibrated these sensors? Gorthax checked the maintenance logs. They self-calibrate every cycle according to... Yeah, but when's the last time someone checked if the self-calibration was working right? Silence. These flow sensors are telling your system that everything's fine, so the reactor's adjusting to compensate for a problem that ain't really there. Every 17 minutes, the sensor drift lines up with the reactor's adjustment cycle, and you get that fluctuation. But the self-calibration routine has been in place for centuries. It's proven technology. Sure, but sensors wear out. Your self-calibration's probably been slowly drifting off true for years, so slow that the system never flagged it as a problem. 30 minutes later, after manually recalibrating the sensors with equipment that Gorthax admitted he didn't even know they still had, the reactor temperature held rock steady. The fluctuations were gone. Gorthax stared at the readings like they'd performed a miracle. 17 minutes to fix a problem we've been analyzing for weeks. Could have been faster, Dalton said, but we had to find the calibration gear. That night, Gorthax showed up at the humans' workshop with a bottle of something that was probably alcohol and definitely glowed in the dark. "I've been an engineer for 372 years, he said, pouring drinks that smoked ominously. "I've forgotten more about reactors than most species will ever learn, and you three made me feel like a complete amateur today." "Nah," Percy said, accepting the glowing drink cautiously. "You just got stuck in a rut. Happens to everybody. You start trusting your instruments more than your instincts. We don't have instincts in engineering, we have methodology." "That's your problem right there," Rock said. "You can't learn instinct from a manual. You gotta develop it by fixing things until you just know. But that takes decades." "Yep. That's not efficient." "Nope. There must be a way to systematize it." Dalton shook his head. "You keep trying to make this into something it ain't. Engineering ain't about following procedures, that's just assembly. Real engineering is about understanding why things work, and you can't get that from a screen. You gotta get your hands dirty." Gorthax took a long drink of the glowing liquid. "The Confederation has spent millennia developing perfect systems, run by perfect procedures, overseen by perfect protocols. And you're telling me it's all useless?" "Not useless," Percy said, "just incomplete. You can't replace experience with rules. You can only use rules to guide experience. That's almost philosophical." "Nah, it's just practical." Word about the reactor fix spread, and suddenly everyone wanted the humans to look at their problems. The communications array that worked fine, except during important calls. The gravity generator that made people slightly heavier on Tuesdays. The food synthesizer that had been producing everything 2 degrees colder than specification for years. But everyone just accepted it. The humans developed a routine. Dalton handled mechanical systems, using an approach he called aggressive troubleshooting, which mostly involved hitting things and listening to the sounds they made. Rox tackled anything electrical, with a soldering iron that she'd modified to work with 17 different alien power standards. Percy specialized in what he called the simple stuff, plumbing, structural issues, and anything that the aliens had overcomplicated into oblivion. They kept finding the same problems, systems that were too automated, sensors that were trusted implicitly instead of verified. Maintenance schedules based on theoretical degradation curves instead of actual wear and tear. Safety protocols so elaborate that they prevented people from actually checking if things were safe. The station started working better, not perfectly, but noticeably better. Doors opened on the first try, lights stayed at consistent brightness. The ambient temperature stopped fluctuating based on which computational model was currently running the climate control. But this created a new problem. The Confederation's Central Technical Institute demanded a report. They wanted to know exactly what the humans had done so they could implement these improvements systematically across their entire infrastructure network spanning 17,000 worlds. Dalton tried to write the report. He really did. He got 3 paragraphs in before giving up. "How do you explain looking at something in a way that makes it sound scientific?" Rox had attempted to create a flowchart of their diagnostic process. It looked like a plate of spaghetti having an existential crisis. "This is impossible. Every problem's different. You can't just make a chart." Percy had taken a different approach. His report consisted of 1 sentence. "Fix what's broken, ignore what ain't, and don't trust computers to tell you which is which." the Technical Institute was not impressed. They sent a representative. Her name was Inquisitor Yelmara, and she was exactly what you'd expect from someone whose job title included the word Inquisitor. She looked like someone had combined a praying mantis with a tax auditor and given the result a personal vendetta against Joy. "Your methodology is unacceptable," she announced, her translator adding extra harshness to every syllable. "The Confederation requires documented procedures, reproducible results, and quantifiable metrics. What you're describing is little more than guessing." "Educated guessing," Dalton corrected. "Guessing is not science." "No, but it's engineering." "There's no difference." "Sure there is. Science is about figuring out why things work. Engineering is about making things work. Sometimes you don't got time to figure out the why." Yelmara's mandibles clicked in agitation. "This is precisely the kind of dangerous thinking that leads to catastrophic cascading failures, without proper understanding of underlying principles. Lady, with all due respect, your proper understanding had that reactor fluctuating for weeks. We fixed it in 17 minutes. Through luck, through experience. Experience without theoretical grounding is meaningless." Gorthax, who'd been listening from the doorway, made a sound like a deflating bagpipe. "Inquisitor Yelmara, I've worked with the humans for 6 weeks now. I've learned more about practical engineering in that time than I learned in 50 years of theoretical study." "You've learned bad habits." "I've learned to trust my senses again, to question the instruments, to actually look at what I'm working on instead of just trusting what the screens tell me. This is an epidemic of anti-intellectual sentiment. We cannot function as an advanced civilization if we abandon rigorous methodology in favor of primitive intuition." "Then maybe," Rock said quietly, "your rigorous methodology ain't working as well as you think it is." The room went silent. You could have heard a bolt drop, which, given the station's maintenance history, probably happened somewhere nearby. Yelmara's mandibles were vibrating with barely contained rage. "I will be filing a formal complaint with the Confederation Council. Your presence here is creating instability in our carefully balanced technical infrastructure. You are undermining centuries of established practice. You are—" The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in with that sickly green glow that emergency lighting always has, regardless of species. An alarm started blaring. Not the gentle attention-required chime the station usually used, but a full-throated, "Something is seriously wrong" klaxon. Yelmara's translator managed to convey panic even through the mechanical voice. "What's happening?" "Main power failure," Gorthax said, checking a panel. "Backup systems are online, but they're only designed for life support and critical systems. We've got maybe 4 hours before—" "Where's the main power coupling?" Dalton was already moving. "Level 42, Section 7, but you can't just—" "Show me!" The power coupling chamber was in chaos. Smoke everywhere, alarms screaming, and a cluster of engineers standing around looking at screens while sparks fountained from equipment that was clearly on fire, not metaphorically fire, actual fire. "Why is nobody putting out the fire?" Percy grabbed an extinguisher off the wall. "We're analyzing the failure cascade to determine the optimal response strategy," one of the engineers shouted over the alarms. "The optimal response is put out the damn fire." Rox grabbed another extinguisher. It took 30 seconds to suppress the flames. The coupling equipment looked like someone had tried to teach it about modern art through the medium of melted metal. Smoke still rose from various surfaces that probably shouldn't smoke. "What happened?" Dalton asked. "The primary power coupling experienced a catastrophic overload event," the lead engineer explained, still staring at a screen. "The safety protocols should have prevented this, but somehow the fault isolation system failed to activate, causing a feedback loop that skipped the technical details. What caused it? We're still analyzing the data to determine—" Dalton was already climbing into the smoking wreckage. "Rox, I need light." She found a portable lamp and aimed it into the machinery. Dalton poked around for maybe 2 minutes. "Found it!" "Found what?" Yelmara had followed them down. You can't possibly have diagnosed the problem in... Dalton held up a piece of melted metal. Somebody installed the wrong coupling adapter. See this? This is rated for 200 amps. Your system's running 400. This thing's been slowly overheating for probably months until it finally gave up and melted. The lead engineer finally looked away from his screen. That's impossible. The installation was done according to exact specifications. Every component was verified against the certified parts database. Well, somebody put in the wrong part. Maybe it was mislabeled. Maybe someone grabbed it by mistake. Maybe your parts database is wrong. But this here's a 200 amp coupling in a 400 amp system, and that's why it melted. But the sensors should have detected the overcurrent condition. Percy was examining the sensor array. Your sensors are monitoring downstream of the coupling. By the time the current got to where you're measuring it, it was fine. Nobody thought to put a sensor on the coupling itself, because the coupling is a standard component with established thermal tolerances. We don't need to monitor it specifically. You do if someone installs the wrong one. The implications of this settled over the room like radioactive fallout. The entire monitoring system, carefully designed over decades, had a blind spot. A simple, stupid blind spot that nobody had noticed because everyone trusted that the parts database was correct and the installation procedures were followed. How long to fix it? Gorthax asked. Dalton examined the damage. Well, the coupling's melted, so we need a new one. Plus, we got to replace about 6 feet of wiring that got cooked. And we should probably check every other coupling in the system to make sure this ain't the only wrong one. But the actual work? 4 hours if we don't stop for lunch. 4 hours? The lead engineer looked like he might pass out. A failure of this magnitude requires weeks of analysis. We need to model the failure cascade, verify the integrity of adjacent systems, run comprehensive diagnostics. Or, Rox interrupted, we could just fix it. They fixed it in 3 hours and 45 minutes. 15 minutes saved because they did stop for lunch, and eating gave Dalton an idea about reinforcing the mounting bracket. When they brought the power back online, everything worked. Not just worked, but worked smoothly. The voltage was more stable than it had been in years. The lead engineer stared at his readings like they'd personally betrayed him. This is impossible. The repair was too fast. You couldn't have possibly verified all the necessary... We verified that it works, Percy said. Ain't that what matters? Yelmara had been unusually quiet during all of this. Now she spoke, her voice lacking its earlier harshness. You didn't consult the failure analysis protocols. You didn't model the potential secondary effects. You didn't verify your repair against the specification database. You just fixed it. Yep, this is everything I was trained to believe is wrong. And yet the system is functioning at higher efficiency than before the failure. Sometimes, Dalton said, the right way and the official way ain't the same way. Something changed in Yelmara after that. She didn't leave, but she stopped criticizing. Instead, she started watching, following the humans around, taking notes, asking questions that weren't accusatory, just curious. When you look at a broken system, she asked Dalton one day, what are you looking for? Things that don't belong, things that are worn, things that feel wrong. Feel wrong? That's not a quantifiable metric. Sure it is. You just got to calibrate your senses. Look, if you see a bolt that's slightly discolored compared to the others, that might mean it's made of different metal. Why is it different? Maybe it's a replacement. If it's a replacement, maybe it was replaced wrong. See what I mean? You're describing pattern recognition based on visual anomalies. If that makes you feel better, sure. Yelmara spent a week following rocks around. How do you know which wire goes where? They're color-coded. Yes, but your species perceives colors differently than most Confederation species. How do you verify you're interpreting the coding correctly? I test them with a multimeter. But that requires disconnecting them, which risks losing track of the original configuration. That's why I take a picture first. A picture? Yeah, with my phone. Rox held up her smartphone, which had become something of a curiosity among the aliens. I take a picture before I touch anything. Then if I forget where something goes, I just look at the picture. That's actually brilliant. Yelmara made notes. Visual documentation of initial state conditions before implementing modifications. Why isn't this standard protocol? Probably because y'all are too busy documenting everything else to document the one thing that actually matters. Percy got stuck with Yelmara for 2 days while tracking down an intermittent fault in the waste management system. She watched him spend 6 hours just listening to pipes. "What are you hearing?" she finally asked. "That one sounds different." "Different how?" "Just different, more echo-eye, like it's not full of water when it should be. And from this auditory deviation you can determine the exact nature of the malfunction?" "Nah, but it tells me where to start looking." He was right, of course. That particular pipe had a slow leak that the sensors hadn't caught because it was outside the monitored sections. The leak had been there so long it had created a mineral deposit that was slowly clogging the line. Would have completely blocked it in another month, causing a catastrophic backup. Percy found it because it sounded wrong. Yelmara's report to the Technical Institute was 57 pages long. The humans never read it, but word got around that it basically said, "Everything we think we know about engineering is incomplete." The humans have demonstrated that direct observation and experiential knowledge provide diagnostic capabilities that exceed our instrument-based methodologies in practical applications. Recommend comprehensive review of all technical training protocols. This did not go over well with everyone. Half the Confederation's engineering departments declared Yelmara's findings to be dangerous anti-intellectual sentiment. The other half wanted to hire the humans as consultants. A few wanted to hire them as instructors. Dalton, Rox, and Percy just wanted to go home. They'd been in space for 4 months now. They missed Earth. They missed weather. They missed food that didn't come from a synthesizer. Mostly, they missed working on things that made sense. "Alien technology's too complicated," Dalton complained. "Everything's got 17 subsystems when it only needs 2. And the manuals." Rox shook her head. 5,000 pages to tell you how to change a light bulb. Percy was more philosophical about it. They're smart folks, just educated past the point of usefulness. The Confederation Council called them in for an official meeting. This involved another complicated chamber with another elaborate seating arrangement, where everyone could see everyone else in a configuration that was supposedly optimal for diplomatic discourse, but mostly just made everyone's neck hurt. The council overseer, a floating jellyfish thing that pulsed with self-importance, addressed them through a translator that added gravitas to every word. "The Confederation recognizes your contributions to our technical infrastructure. Your methods, while unorthodox, have proven effective. We would like to offer you permanent positions as special consultants with full Confederation citizenship and benefits." "What kind of benefits?" Percy asked. "Access to 17,000 worlds, participation in galactic governance, the honor of serving the greater cosmic community. Do we get paid?" The jellyfish thing pulsed in what might have been confusion. "Paid? You would be granted access to resource allocation protocols based on need. So, no, you would contribute to the collective good without the primitive constraints of monetary exchange." Dalton, Rox, and Percy looked at each other. They'd developed a way of communicating without words over the past 4 months. Right now, that communication said, "Hell no." "Appreciate the offer," Dalton said, "but we're going to have to pass." "Pass? You would refuse this honor." "It ain't that we don't appreciate what y'all are doing here," Rox said carefully, "but we're not really a good fit for your organization." "But you've revolutionized our understanding of practical engineering." "Yeah, and that's nice, but we got lives back home. Jobs, people. We've been gone 4 months already. Any longer and we're going to start losing contracts." The council overseer's pulsing intensified. Surely your primitive commercial concerns are insignificant compared to the opportunity to shape galactic infrastructure. Our primitive commercial concerns are how we eat, Percy said flatly, and no offense, but your food synthesizer makes everything taste like cardboard. There was a long silence. The council members seemed genuinely confused by this turn of events. In their experience, everyone wanted to join the Confederation. The opportunity to be part of something greater than themselves. The chance to contribute to galactic civilization. The honor of, "We just want to go home," Dalton said. But the Confederation wasn't ready to let them go that easily. Gorthax showed up at their workshop with a proposal. What if you didn't stay, but you visited, periodically, when we have problems that our engineers can't solve? Like consultants? Rox asked. Exactly. You come, you fix what's broken, you leave. We pay you. Actual payment, not resource allocation nonsense. We'd even cover your travel costs. How often we talking? Maybe 4 times a year, a week each time. We'd schedule around your availability. They talked it over. It was a good offer. Good money, interesting problems, and they'd still get to go home between jobs. Plus the aliens were kind of growing on them, like a fungus, but a friendly fungus. All right, Dalton said, but we got conditions. 1, we don't do paperwork. You want reports? You write 'em. 2, we fix things our way. No oversight committees, no approval processes, no protocols. 3, you pay us in Earth currency. None of this galactic credit nonsense. Gorthax's species didn't have facial expressions, but he radiated relief. Agreed! All of it! Agreed! They spent their last week training a small group of Confederation engineers in what Yelmara had officially designated Applied Observational Technical Analysis, but what everyone else called the human method. It mostly involved taking people to broken equipment and making them look at it without consulting any screens first. This was harder than it sounded. The engineers kept wanting to pull up sensor data. They kept trying to run diagnostic algorithms. They physically struggled with the concept of trusting their own observations over their instruments. "What do you see?" Dalton asked an engineer named Krelix while they stood in front of a malfunctioning door. "I see a standard Type 7 access portal with integrated biometric verification and—" "No, what do you see?" I just told you. You told me what you know about it. I'm asking what you see. Right now, with your eyes." Krelix's tentacles squirmed uncomfortably. "I see. A door." "Good! What else?" It's crooked. The left side is higher than the right side. There you go. Now why might a door be crooked? The mounting bracket could be loose, or the frame could be warped, so go check." This was a revelation for Krelix. The door was crooked because the mounting bracket had come loose. Fixing it took 5 minutes and a screwdriver. No diagnostics, no sensor analysis, no protocol review. Just looking at the problem and fixing the obvious thing. "It's so simple," Krelix said, sounding almost betrayed. "Most things are," Rox said. "Y'all just complicate 'em." Their last day on the station felt strange. They'd spent 4 months in this place, fixed hundreds of things, and somehow become part of the community. Engineers kept stopping by to say goodbye. Yelmara gave them a formal commendation that they couldn't read because it was in Valorian script, but she seemed proud of it. Gorthax gave them another bottle of that glowing alcohol and made them promise to come back. The transport ride home was quieter than the ride up had been. They were all tired. Good tired, but tired. Percy actually fell asleep, which was impressive given the uncomfortable seats. "Think they'll be okay?" Rox asked. "The aliens," Dalton shrugged. "They're smart. They'll figure it out. Might take 'em a while to break all those bad habits, but they'll get there. Think we'll actually go back? Money's good. Problems are interesting. Plus, that reactor Gorthax is building on his homeworld sounds like a real challenge. You just like that he asked for our help instead of acting like he knows everything." "That too." They landed back at the same fairground they'd left from, which now seemed impossibly small and rustic compared to the massive space station they'd been living on. The government helicopter was waiting. The same agents who'd picked them up 4 months ago were there to debrief them. "So," the lead agent said, "how was it?" Dalton thought about it. "Educational." "Did you accomplish the mission objectives?" "Didn't know we had mission objectives. We just fixed things." The agent consulted a tablet. "The Confederation reports that you successfully resolved 473 critical technical issues, implemented new diagnostic protocols, and revolutionized their approach to practical engineering. They've requested your return for additional consulting work." "Yeah, we worked that out with Gorthax." "Gorthax?" The agent looked panicked. "You were supposed to coordinate all communications through official diplomatic channels. You can't just make private arrangements with alien entities." "Why not? He's paying us." "That's not how interstellar relations work. There are protocols, procedures. You can't just what? Fix things and get paid for it? That's literally what we do." The agent looked like she was developing a migraine. "There's going to be paperwork. So much paperwork. Congressional hearings, probably. The UN will want reports. The scientific community will—" "You handle all that," Rox interrupted. "We're gonna go home, sleep in our own beds, and eat food that don't taste like cardboard." They left the agent sputtering into her phone about diplomatic incidents and protocol violations. The fairground was setting up for another expo. Someone was demonstrating a modified carburetor. Someone else had built a robot that could flip burgers. Normal, sensible Earth stuff. "Glad to be back?" Percy asked. "Hell yes," Dalton said. "But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't already looking forward to the next call from Gorthax." "Think they'll actually change how they do things?" "Some will, some won't. That's how it always goes. But at least now they know there's another way. A better way. Different way. Not better, not worse. Just different." Word spread, of course. Can't keep 3 redneck engineers fixing alien technology quiet. News outlets wanted interviews. Scientists wanted to know how they'd done it. Other countries wanted to know why their engineers hadn't been chosen. The whole thing became a minor international incident until someone pointed out that the aliens had basically picked at random and everyone needed to calm down. But something had changed. Engineering schools started teaching a new class called practical problem solving. It mostly involved taking students to broken equipment and making them look at it. The class was wildly popular with students and hated by the theoretical faculty, which probably meant it was doing something right. NASA started a program called Alternative Technical Approaches, which was a fancy way of saying, maybe we should try hitting things with hammers more often. The first test involved a Mars rover that had been stuck for 6 months. The solution turned out to be that a rock was wedged in the wheel. A rock. They'd spent 6 months analyzing telemetry data when the problem was just a rock. Dalton, Rox, and Percy went back to their normal lives, fixing tractors, welding oil rig equipment, maintaining factory machinery. But every few months, they'd get a call from Gorthax. Strange problems on distant worlds, equipment that shouldn't be broken but was. Situations where all the theoretical analysis in the galaxy hadn't produced a solution. They'd go up, fix whatever needed fixing, teach a few more aliens to trust their eyes, and come home. It became routine. Well, as routine as interstellar consulting could be. 5 years later, Yelmara visited Earth. She'd never been to a planet with actual weather before. The rain fascinated her. She stood in it for 20 minutes, mandibles clicking with what might have been delight. "I've been implementing the human method across 17 different Confederation facilities," she told them, over coffee at Dalton's shop. The coffee confused her, but she drank it anyway. "Failure rates have dropped by 63%. Response times have improved by 82%, and perhaps most significantly, engineer satisfaction surveys show a 200% increase in what they call job fulfillment." "They're happier?" Rox asked. "Much happier." Turns out engineers actually enjoy fixing things when they're allowed to do it instead of just analyzing it. Imagine that, Percy said dryly. The Technical Institute is still fighting me, Yelmara continued. They insist that we're abandoning scientific rigor. They claim we're promoting dangerous anti-intellectual attitudes, but the results don't lie. Things work better. They work better because people are actually looking at them. How's Gorthax doing? Dalton asked. His homeworld reactor is operational, running at 112% of designed capacity. He sends his regards and asks if you'd be willing to consult on a fusion project next month. Fusion, huh? That sounds interesting. He said he knew you'd say that. Yelmara left Earth with 7 bags of coffee, 3 toolboxes full of primitive Earth tools, and a promise to return. She'd started teaching her own version of the human method, adapted for species who didn't have the same sensory capabilities as humans. The core principle remained the same, though. Trust your observations. Question your instruments. Fix what's broken, not what the data says is broken. The Confederation never became exactly like Earth engineers. They still loved their protocols and their procedures, but they'd learned to balance theory with practice, to use their instruments as tools rather than truth, to trust that sometimes the obvious solution was the right solution, and somewhere, in workshops and repair bays across 17,000 worlds, engineers were learning to look at things. Really look, not with sensors or algorithms or predictive models, just look, with their eyes, their ears, whatever sensory organs they possessed. And when they found what was wrong, they'd fix it, simply, directly, efficiently. The human method had spread further than anyone expected, not because it was better than the Confederation's traditional approaches, but because it was different. It filled gaps that nobody had realized existed. It solved problems that everyone had assumed required complex solutions. In the end, the galaxy hadn't asked for scientists and gotten redneck engineers. The galaxy had asked for scientists and gotten something more important. It had gotten people who knew that sometimes the smartest thing you can do is trust what you see over what you're told. People who understood that complexity isn't always the answer. People who knew that a bolt in the wrong place could stop a star drive, and that sometimes the solution was just to take it out. The universe had asked for expertise, and Earth had answered with experience.